you do not have to perform in order to build a brand that gets highly known, highly regarded, highly respected. You simply need to come back to who are you? What are your standards? And how do those standards come into what you share and why? Welcome to Rich Work, the podcast for established female entrepreneurs ready to turn their expertise into premium clients and consistent high-ticket revenue. I'm Rachel Pearson, global brand and business strategist, skincare obsessed, and always distracted by booking the next mini break. Here you'll learn how to position like a luxury brand, attract clients who love to invest, and build wealth that actually lasts, so you can create the business and life you want, not someone else's version of success. This is where premium positioning and building wealth meet for women who are rewriting the rules. Let's get into it. When I was describing what this podcast is about to my podcast manager, who will be listening to this and thinking, why is she naming me? I explained about the concept of it, and I explained a bit about my background and why I was bringing this conversation forward. And she said to me, it would be amazing to hear your story at one point. And I thought, yes, it would. I know this is a key reason why I listen to podcasts, why I want to hear about the person that's behind the information, that's behind the insight. I want to hear their story. We are all human. We are all nosy. We want to go into those details. And so I've always had it on my list of episodes to share my story and share more around, why do I think this way about business? Why do I think this way about wealth? Why am I even bringing this podcast forward to you all? And when I sat down to do it, I hit a wall. This is the episode that I've struggled with out of all of the episodes to plan. And the wall I was hitting was either that I didn't want it to be my CV, because that's not going to be helpful for anybody and it's going to be boring for you to listen to. But also, I didn't want to go into a hugely vulnerable share. There are certain aspects of my life, my story, that I won't ever share in public. And where it's ended up is that this is going to be an episode about my story. You're going to learn more about what I've done in the past and why I think the way that I do. But I'm also going to share it from my truth, which is that I do have these moments all the time, right? I'm human, of things not working, of things that have happened in the past that have shaped who I am. And I think the most useful thing that I can share with you in this episode is that those don't have to be part of the way that you build your business and part of the way that you create relationships with potential clients, or you build your brand and you get known for what you do, if you don't want them to be. And I really stand in this because in the online space, we are very encouraged to be highly vulnerable and to share that with a sense of authenticity. And what I want to share in this episode is that that can absolutely be true if it's authentic for you to do that. But it can also be true and authentic for you if you don't want to share your whole self online. So I'm going to be sharing in this episode about me, but it's also about why I don't sell on connection and what I do instead. And I think this distinction really matters more than me sharing my vulnerable story with you. I think it will help you to understand and relate to how I see business. And even if you don't see it in exactly the same way as me, it will give you some questions, reflections on how you want to share your story moving forward, how you want to show up online, how it impacts the perception of your brand and your reputation. One of the key parts that I have that really came through when I was planning out how to share my story here is that I don't feel a need to share my story in order to prove anything. And I know that can sound quite egotistical, as in, oh, I've got nothing to prove. I'm so amazing at what I do. But I want to share where this comes from. And it is from a place of the experience that I've had that has shown me in so many ways that the accolades, the success, the achievements that I have seen in other people that I have been around have never been the most interesting part of that person. They have not been the thing that has made them impressive. I have worked with celebrities over my marketing career before this business. I have worked with billionaires, several multimillionaires, like people that have a lot of money, people that have names that you'd recognize, who are living, and I'll be honest, a really, really different world to a lot of other people. And my story of why I show up, not why I show up, but how I look at business and how I show up in my life as well, has been shaped by those experiences. And more than anything, it has shown me that underneath the labels, the money, the like incredible experiences that people have been able to have and achievements, is that I still saw anxiety. I've still saw insecurity. There were questions, so many conversations in people that I've worked for and that I've worked with, and people that I'm surrounded by now, around whether they are doing enough, whether they have enough, whether they are enough. And it often stemmed from a fear of it all being lost and it disappearing. And this weird guilt about having it and almost not enjoying it whilst it's there, but also being scared that it could all go away in a second. And what this has really shown me over the years of working in different businesses, where I've come into contact with these types of people, is that money and identity are not the same thing. And I spoke about this in the episode around rich and wealth mindset, but I want to go into it a bit more today about what I've learned and how it's enabled me to think. What you attach to your money matters more than how much of it you have. And the people that I've seen that have been the most free around wealth aren't the ones that have the most of it. They're the ones who've detached their worth from it. Now, this is something that is spoken about in quite an abstract sense, especially in the coaching space and in the online space. You have to detach from the outcome and detach from making the sale. But I don't feel like people really go into, what does that really look like? What does that really mean when you're in the middle of it? And I've experienced this from a young age where, and I'm not going to go into this point in my story because this is something that I will always keep private. But when I was growing up, I saw what happened when money comes in and then it goes, and seeing how people respond to that, the emotional turmoil it can create, and how some people can rebuild from that and some people ultimately collapse from it. And the difference between that wasn't resilience or their mindset. It was around, the difference was what they attached to the money in the first place. If your identity is in the money, then losing it takes you with the money. And it's not something that I've read about. It's something that I've watched happen. It's something that I've worked with people when they've had huge amounts of money coming in, huge amounts of money going out. So it's why when I'm working with my clients now, I'm not interested in what they're earning. And I know that might sound strange for somebody who's talking a lot about building a business that makes a lot of money, or building longevity in business, building sustainability, enabling yourself to build brands that then mean that you are positioned to charge more money. But I'm not interested when I'm looking at a client. I don't care about what they make. I use phrases like multi-six figure or seven figure as a signal, but that's not the qualifying factor of how my clients come to work with me. I'm interested in what they are attaching to either what they desire or what they earn right now. Because when I understand that, that's when I can see what their true ambition is, but also where the gaps are, what the work is that we can come in and do to enable money to flow more easily to them, enable them to enjoy their business, enable it to be more fulfilling for them. When I talk about being detached from money and status, because I talked about people that have celebrity status, it's not cold. And I think this is where it's spoken about in the online space of, detach, like don't include emotion in your business. I actually think that's not a very helpful thing to talk about, of not being emotional in your business. Some of the best things, the best ideas I've had have come from me being emotional in my business. It's that I then don't let that emotion make every decision from there. So I have been very activated by things that have happened in business where I'm like, I don't agree with that. I'm going to do it this way. Or people telling me that I can't do something. I'm like, watch me. I always say when people underestimate me, that's when things get really dangerous. So the emotion is there. Like, it's very activating for me to come from that place, but I don't continue to run decisions once I've got the idea from that place. And it's the same when I'm working with clients, and you might feel this as I'm talking it through, is that I can see when somebody is pricing from the fear that they have rather than the value that they hold, and they know the value and the transformation that they bring. I can see when their business model is built around proving something rather than sustaining something. It's about hustle into getting what they want rather than it coming from a place of, I know what I'm creating overall, and I'm just continuing to be the best version of me in order to attain that. And I can see it because the money that my clients are making, it's not tied to the results they're getting. It's not tied to whether their launch is working or not. That doesn't mean that I don't care, but I have to be detached from what their emotions are in their business in order for me to come in and be able to see how I can best support it, how to see the gaps. And it's not me being arrogant of I can just come in and see any gaps in any business, but because I'm not chasing a revenue amount, because I'm not expecting a client to have a certain result by working with me, I'm not performing, I'm not trying to prove, I'm not seeking that validation for them. And that's what means that I have clarity when I come into their business. I am able to see, detach from what they are experiencing and look at it in a really logical way. And so when we talk about being detached from the outcome, what I'm inviting you to think about is that it's not just about you being detached from the outcome in your own business and being detached from the result. It's actually, this is a leadership piece. This is a piece around how you hold yourself. Detachment isn't about being unemotional. It's about being able to hold the emotions in something and then being able to detach from it to make the decisions moving forward. And I call it a leadership piece because when I am working with clients, I need to be detached in order for me to then go in and work with them in the way that I have said that I can work with them, to be able to hold them to a higher standard when I see that they're dropping out of it. I wouldn't be able to do that if I was so embroiled in the emotions of their results and my own results as well. If I'm constantly thinking about, oh, this client might leave because their launch isn't going as well as we planned, that's making it so much about me and not them. That's not leadership. So I wanted to get a bit more into how being detached from emotion, being detached from the outcome, being away from the titles and what we pedestal as success is such a strength of yours if you see it and you channel it in that way. And this is something that I have experienced from an early point in my childhood where money had to become something that I became very detached from, and then has grown as I've, grown in my career and I've had experiences with people that have a lot of money. I've lent into that more. And so you don't have to have had the same experience as me. Not everybody that's listening to this will have worked with billionaires. Not everybody will have worked with celebrities. That's not the point. The point is, where are you still putting somebody or something on a pedestal right now, where you are feeling like this is the way that this happens in order for success to be valid? Or maybe it's a money amount. Maybe it's a client that comes into your DMs and the first thought is, how am I going to work with that level of client? Maybe it's somebody that challenges an opinion of yours who has a larger community. Where are you pedestaling things right now? Because that's when you get to make a decision about what you detach from a place of leadership, not from having to take yourself out of the situation because you can't emotionally cope with it, but from a place of, okay, interesting, let me observe this. If money, if title, if success, if years in business, if follower count is not the thing that marks the success of this person right now, then how am I choosing to show up in this conversation? Because then you bring it back into how you want to show up for your brand, for the way that you see things, for the way that you lead conversations. You're not doing it as a reaction to a perception of somebody else's success. And the reason I talk about this is because, and I know that I said this is going to be part of my story, is because I have never resonated with the whole thing of using vulnerability to sell. And I really struggled with this when I moved into coaching, because a lot of people really sold from this space of, I've had this lowest moment, so people feel connected to it. I'm just going to call it how I see it. And some people might disagree with me, but I have nothing against being vulnerable. I have nothing against sharing your story from whatever truth you hold. I just don't agree with sharing that has to be the way that you share your story, and that you have to share everything in order for people to feel you in truth and your authenticity. I understand why people do it in this way, but I just choose to do it in a different way. And sometimes I've had criticism about that. I've had people say that I'm putting myself on a pedestal, that I am not being relatable enough, that I am not creating connection, I'm not creating warmth. And I don't agree with that. That I feel like the most inauthentic thing that you can do, and the thing that will create a disconnect and that will create coldness, is if you manufacture a moment of vulnerability to make somebody else feel something. Like, that is the most inauthentic thing that I personally could do. And I'm not saying that people that share vulnerability are manufacturing it, but for me, in my truth, going to an extreme exposing level of vulnerability, like for me, crying on my stories or crying in my content, is just not something that I'm ever going to do, because it feels manufactured to me, because I would have to perform for that to happen. So it's not that it's wrong, but it's not my truth and the way that I do it. And I wanted to share this because I think this is a really key part of how you position yourself as a leader in the space, as somebody that is building a premium business, or when I say premium business, a business that is built for longevity, that is really marking out the clients that you are for, the clients that you are not for. The brands that I've talked about throughout the episodes of this podcast so far are the ones that have held their value, that have created real loyalty, that people return to, and they haven't needed to overshare. And they don't chase relatability. They are clear about what they stand for. And then they let you decide if that's for you. And that's the way that I choose to show up for my story, and how I show up in my content, how I show up for my clients, is I'm 100% transparent about the way things have worked, the way things haven't worked. Nothing is glossy. I'm not trying to create this perfect image of my life or my feed looking incredible all the time. Bad things happen, things go wrong. That's the truth. But am I going to share all of those? Am I going to share them, the moments that I have privately? I'm not. Personally, I'm not, because I am choosing what is in my truth. My clients don't need to share in my trauma and my processing. They want to share in my thinking. They want to share in how I've then chosen to move through things. They need someone who's done the internal work without needing to feel like I need to share it to monetize from it. They are looking for clarity. They're looking for my standards. They're looking for the way that I hold myself, the way that I move. And it's not to say that I'm an unemotional robot. Like I'm not. But for me personally, there's a time to be able to share moments of my story and moments of my life. And the other side of that is, it's as important for me to choose what I don't share, or what I process first before I'm sharing it. And I started off saying that this episode is very much about me thinking about how I wanted to share my story. And what became really apparent when I was planning out this podcast episode is that I don't want to do an episode that is a highly vulnerable share about things I've overcome in my childhood, or things that I've overcome when I've been knocked back, or things that have defining moments of myself that have led to where I am. And I was sitting with it and I was like, why is it that I don't want to do that? Because if somebody asks me a question, I'm very transparent about what it is that I can share with them. But the reason I didn't want to share in this way is because I don't feel like I have to. And that might sound very flippant, but I think it's a really important message. If you're listening to this and you struggle with showing up sometimes online because you feel like you want to have a sense of privacy, where you show up and you feel like there's just moments of your life where you want to be present outside of online the online space. You want to be present outside of content. You want to spend time with your kids. You want to spend time with your dog. You want to spend time going on holiday. I went for a walk earlier before recording this podcast episode and was walking around the lake outside my house. And I just closed my eyes and I just felt the sun on my face. And that sounds quite cliche. And I'm not skipping around the lake every lunchtime. Be like, my life is so perfect. But I wanted to be in that moment. I didn't want to take a picture of it and say, look at me, I'm choosing to step away from my business because I have this flexibility. I didn't take my phone out with me, didn't record any content. This lake is beautiful. I could have done a story. I haven't actually done a story today yet on my Instagram. And there's this niggle that happens to all of us in the back of our heads of, I should show up and share this. But this is also part of how I am and how I move. And I know is a standard that I hold that attracts clients to work with me is I'm very boundaried about my time. I'm very conscious of how I'm building this business. And it hasn't been the fastest way. I'll be honest with you. I could have made a lot more money by this point by doing things that I fundamentally don't agree with. But it really attracts in the clients that I know share those values. It's not about being fast or slow, but it is about how I'm building this business is as important as what it gives me, like the money that it gives me, the recurring revenue, the opportunities. In my opinion, they all come from the way that I hold myself outside of the business. I choose to go for a walk without my phone is the same way that I will say to a client, like, actually, I think you need to get out of your head and into your body right now. I think that in terms of embodying the way that you lead your clients and being able to share that and show up on stories is so much about you actually getting into what brings you joy right now and then sharing from that place. But I need to lead myself in that way first. So I haven't showed up in this podcast episode to share my whole vulnerable story, but that's really the point of this podcast episode, is that this is what I offer. This is how I see things. This is enough. And I trust that this is enough for the right people that listen in. And hopefully you will have taken something from this, whether you are somebody that likes to share a lot of what you do. Like I said, that's absolutely gets to work if it's in your truth. And I think what I want to invite you into, though, is that you don't need to do that in order to build the business, build the brand, build the connection. The actual trick, I'd say, for being able to show up in the most authentic way is that you detach from whatever status you think that gives you. You detach from needing to show up in your stories in order to have that in-demand brand. You detach from needing to make the money in order to show up as the most embodied leader that you are. You detach from needing to have the achievement, the sold out launch, the speed that your offers sell out in order to go out and sell again today. Is the detachment from what you think has to happen in order for the results to come, which is the key thing that I have learned over not only my experience in this business, but my experience working with people that have a lot of money, that have the titles, that have a lot of things that people think are the markers of success, is those things didn't always bring them the happiness and the fulfillment. The people that were able to enjoy those things whilst being completely detached from them were the happiest and the most fulfilled. So this has been a different episode to others that you have listened to in Rich Work, less about the teaching of the strategy, but there is gold in this if you choose to find it. You do not have to perform in order to build a brand that gets highly known, highly regarded, highly respected. You simply need to come back to who are you? What are your standards? And how do those standards come into what you share and why? If you've listened to the last episodes, you already know how I think. Now, hopefully, you know a little bit more about what I stand for and you know my approach and you know the why behind it. I'm Rachel Pearson. This is Rich Work. I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to Rich Work. I'd love it if you left a review. It helps other women to find us. In the meantime, follow me on Instagram at rachelpearson.co for a different take on premium positioning, one that's not about fitting a box. See you next week.